Hey everyone, and welcome. Settle in, grab a cozy drink, and make yourselves comfortable, because we are diving into an explainer today that is, well, literally tailor-made for the hopeless romantics out there. Today, we're exploring the enduring magnetic pull of destiny and fated love. We're going to look closely at those invisible threads that connect us, how life can sometimes pull two people completely apart, dragging them down totally different paths, only to miraculously stitch them back together at the exact right moment. We'll be unpacking a profoundly beautiful story from our source material that perfectly captures the anatomy of a second chance.
So do you believe in fated meetings? Like, truly believe in them? I want you to really think about that for a second. Let it sink in. We've all felt that universal temptation of the what if, right? What if the person sitting next to you on your morning commute is someone you're actually meant to know? What if a random fleeting encounter is actually serendipity, just quietly working in the background of your life? It's a wildly powerful thought. And as you'll see as we unpack this story, sometimes the universe has a really funny, unpredictable way of answering those lingering what-ifs right when we least expect it.
All right, part 1. The Singer and the Reader, a fated bus ride.
Our story kicks off on a totally normal, mundane bus ride, which suddenly brought together two vastly different worlds. On one hand, we have a renowned singer. Her life is inherently transient, literally defined by a constant, dizzying blur of movement. She travels from village to village, packing up and moving state to state for her performances. But then, in stark contrast, there's the caring, handsome boy she happened to meet on that very bus. His life is deeply grounded. He finds his adventure not by crossing state lines, but by sitting quietly and immersing himself in thriller novels. Despite these seemingly opposite lifestyles, one chaotic and constantly moving, the other quiet and rooted, when they crossed paths, an immediate, profound connection sparked. They simply fell in love.
But we all know our relationship doesn't just happen overnight. It's a journey spanning years, filled with unpredictable peaks and valleys. It all started with the pure euphoria of that initial spark at their bus meeting. But love, of course, doesn't exist in a vacuum. It has to survive the real world. That initial joy eventually progressed into a painful career separation, which deepened into the silent years, a period of genuine aching heartbreak where they were completely absent from each other's lives. But just when the story seemed entirely over, it culminated in this completely unexpected, serendipitous reunion. It's a classic romantic arc, but the incredibly vulnerable details of exactly how it happened are what make it so beautifully human.
Moving into part 2, when lives drift apart, caught in different currents.
The initial romance they shared was undeniably strong, but the harsh reality of her profession as a singer eventually began to strain their newly formed bond. She was constantly moving around for her art, and that constant motion creates friction. Think of them as drifting boats. They're two connected vessels that originated from the exact same tranquil harbor, that beautifully shared moment of falling in love on the bus. But slowly, imperceptibly, they got caught in different currents. Her current is the demanding, unpredictable, traveling life of a performer, and his is the stationary, quiet life back in town. They were slowly drifting apart, not because they actively wanted to leave each other, but simply because the waters of their lives were pulling them in opposite directions.
So how exactly did that profound connection fade away? It's kind of a heartbreaking progression to map out, mostly because it really wasn't intentional at first. She had to travel outside of their state for work. Initially, they defied the distance. They fought the currents with everything they had, speaking to each other constantly, stealing moments on the phone whenever they could. But eventually, the singer had to leave town permanently. The physical distance just grew too vast, the currents pulled way too hard against them, and the calls became less frequent until they just stopped altogether. And so years passed in total, absolute silence. Two lives that had once collided were now completely apart.
Which brings us to part 3, the anatomy of a second chance, picking up the bookmark.
But, as any hopeless romantic out there knows, silence isn't always the end of the story. Fate operates entirely on its own timeline, quietly stepping in when human efforts have completely failed. When they finally reconnected, it wasn't about erasing what happened or trying to rewrite the past. Think of it as a paused chapter. A true second chance is really just picking up the book exactly where the bookmark was left to gather dust. Despite those long, painful years of total silence, the emotional connection they shared was actually never destroyed. It was merely paused, waiting patiently on the shelf for the book to be opened once again.
And out of all the places in the entire world, out of all the streets and cafes and cities, fate brought them back together at a crowded bookshop. They collided in a space entirely dedicated to stories. I mean, it is the perfect, almost impossibly serendipitous backdrop, especially considering the boy's deep, grounding love for reading novels. It's almost as if the universe crafted the setting itself. filling the air with the scent of old paper and quiet whispers, specifically to reawaken their paused chapter.
And the crazy thing is, despite the years of silence and the literal miles between them, they fell right back into this witty, familiar banter. Catching sight of her, he holds back a warm grin and asks, "Still reading romance novels?" She laughs, a sound that bridges the gap of all those missing years, and replies, "And you're still into thrillers, I see." The absolute ease between them in this moment is just breathtaking. It proves that despite everything, the drifting, the distance, the heartbreak, their conversation flowed seamlessly. It was as if no time had truly passed at all.
And finally, Part 4, Writing a New Chapter, the Emotional Climax.
After that initial shock in the bookshop, they didn't just exchange a polite hello and walk away forever, no way. They sat down together over a warm cup of coffee to delicately unpack their shared history. First, they bridged the gap, filling in the blanks of their separate lives, the places she'd sung, the quiet days he'd spent. Then, crucially and honestly, bravely, they acknowledged past regrets. They looked at the pain of their separation head-on, validating the hurt of those silent years. And finally, with the air cleared and their hearts open, they gently began exploring the fragile, beautiful possibility of a second chance.
Amidst that vulnerable conversation about life and deeply held regrets, the boy, sitting directly across the small table, looked into her eyes. He took a breath, letting go of all his defenses, and confessed softly, "I never stopped loving you."
The emotional weight of that moment is just immense. The source material paints such a vivid, tender picture of her reaction. She slowly reaches out across the table, her hand warmly covering his. A single tear escapes her eye, tracing down her cheek, and with a voice visibly trembling with raw emotion, she replies, "Neither did I." In that exact second, the years of agonizing silence, the chaotic drifting currents, the massive geographical distance, it all just collapses in the face of this enduring, faded love. That day, the bookmark was gently removed, and their beautifully interrupted story resumed. They began writing an entirely new chapter together. They proved to us that sometimes fate really does step in when we need it most, orchestrating the exact perfect moment to give us the second chance we were absolutely certain was lost forever. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final, lingering thought. What new chapters might be waiting for you to pick up the bookmark? Whether it's an old friend you lost touch with, a past passion you let slip away, or, hey, maybe even a faded love of your own. Remember that some genuine connections never truly fade. They're just waiting for the right crowded bookshop and the right unexpected moment to beautifully begin again. Thank you so much for exploring this deeply romantic story with me today. Keep your eyes open for those quiet moments of serendipity.